And we'll now jump into the joint meeting Rules and Open Government Committee and Committee of the Whole. And I will note for the record that we have a full Rules Committee, and we might even have a few extra council members, so we have a quorum. We'll start with a review of the final agenda, which is October 22nd. And we'll start with pages 4 and 5. If there are any changes? All right, any changes on pages 6 and 7? We need a sunshine waiver on 2.8, I believe. Okay, pages 8 and 9. I would just make one modification on 214A, the travel to City Lab Urban Solutions in Washington, D.C. I know Aspen Institute is paying for most or all of that, but there may be mayor's office budget as well. I believe we're getting completely covered by Aspen, but if I'm not mistaken, I wanted to ensure that was included in 2014A. Pages 10 and 11. All right, pages 12 and 13. There's a 10-day sunshine waiver required on item 3.6. I ask the maker of the motion to consider. Pages 14 and 15. Pages 16 and 17. Okay, and then we have some ads on three items on the consent calendar. All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda for Tuesday, October 22nd with a sunshine waiver on item 2.8, a modification to item 2.14A to add possible city funds, sunshine waiver on item 3.6, and a sunshine waiver for an ad sheet with 3 items.
Thank you. And specifically, I should have said that potential use of the mayor's office budget is only with regard to the trip to Washington, D.C. Okay, on that motion, let's vote, or do we just orally? I guess we can just vote orally, huh? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're on to October 29th. Are there any changes in pages 4 and 5? Pages 6 and 7? Pages 8 and 9? Pages 10 and 11? Pages 12 and 13. I see a note indicating, I think staff is looking for deferral 4.3 for 1 week. Is that right? That's on the bridge housing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so this is just to provide the context. The council asked us to come back if we hadn't gotten to a point of resolving everything with Caltrans. I think we're getting closer, but we're not there yet, so we wanted to put something on the agenda to kind of...
Okay.
Yep.
I know Lee and I have been texting each other furiously as we're both talking to Caltrans. I just ask if that item does come back and we need to, that also the resolution would be included within that item as the council directed. Okay. All right, page 14. Okay. Any other changes?
Motion to approve the agenda for Tuesday, October 29th, deferring item 4.3.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move on then. Item D is equity study session. I believe we're setting those dates, for that date, for December 13th.
Yeah, actually, if I could, Mayor, so we're actually proposing to set 2 study sessions here. There's actually 2 agendas. We've received a lot of input on this. Really, which driving kind of the format here is really getting to a place to where we understand what our role is as a city. So it's not so much about if we should have a role, but what is our role. And so that's what's driving the framework here for these 2 sessions. Angel and Lee are heading this work up, and they're available if there are any questions.
Okay, any questions? All right, is there a motion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we're moving on then to item E, which is the public record. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Okay, we'll move straight to G2, which relates to single-family home modifications. Councilmember Jimenez and Davis have a memorandum. Who would like to speak? Councilmember Jimenez?
I could talk a little bit about it, yeah. Sure. So thank you so much for considering this. Wanted to share a little bit about how this came about. There was maybe about a month ago, I had my regular office hours at the Edenville Library, and we had about 25 people present, which is uncommon. And so some of the concerns of the residents there was that a property owner in their residential zoned area in their neighborhood, and the area is not too far from District 10 up against the foothills off Curry Drive. And so they brought to my attention something that was happening. And it's a little further down the process that I would like, because I think I'm not sure there's much that can be done for their current situation, but it really daylighted, I think, some potential challenges that we may see as we move forward with exploring densification in certain neighborhoods. And in this particular case, I think it was a 3-bedroom home, and it sits between 2 other residential properties in a very, very residential area, single-family homes. There are no condos, duplexes, anything like that in the area. And what stood out to me, and what I think is sort of the reasoning for bringing this forward, and actually, before I go there, let me also say that I'm certainly no fan of NIMBYism and folks that don't want certain things to happen in their neighborhood. And so one of the first things I did in listening to the residents was trying to ascertain and get a better understanding and make sure that that wasn't in fact what was happening. And I feel in seeing everything in totality of what's taking place in their neighborhood, I felt certain enough to bring this forward. Because I really don't think it has to do with NIMBYism. I think it's just a very logical sort of questioning of what's being allowed in the neighborhood. And so this particular home, I think it has a total, I was just out there this afternoon as well, it has a total of about 6 doors that lead out to the outside of the home. And on one side of the home, that is literally a few feet from the neighbor, there are about 5 of those doors, individual rooms and doors. Essentially, it looks like a motel. It's a nice area, very, well-to-do neighborhood, but the character of the building and the way things are being done, I think, really calls into question just the way we're going about things. And so that is the reason for the submission of the memo, because I think we in the planning department need to. I think it'd be helpful, especially as we move forward, exploring densification in residential areas, really thinking through parking, thinking through the design guidelines. And I would also say that if I had another opportunity, and I suspect maybe Councilmember Davis feels the same way, that we probably would have reworded recommendation in the memo. I would have it read something along the lines of direct staff to return to council with proposed revisions to the zoning ordinance that would thoroughly vet single-family home modifications that are clearly designed to facilitate non-single-family home usage. And so I know we put discourage in there, and that might have discouraged some of you or from actually, being supportive of this. But that is really not the point. I think just we need to be thoughtful as to how we do it. The other thing I would say is I pulled up the memo that was written. I think it was me, the mayor, Councilmember Arenas, as well as Councilmember Perales, as it relates to the general plan update. That was written June 7, 2019, and one of the recommendations there, and this was, I believe, approved, is one of them, number one, for example, was opportunity housing. So it says explore housing, allowing single-family parcels currently designated residential neighborhoods to redevelop 2 to 4 units per parcel with the following parameters. And I certainly signed on in this memo. I think it's an important thing, but I think in this memo, the ones that are most applicable to what we're sort of seeing in the neighborhoods is 1A, which talks about limiting parcels proximate to transit-oriented urban villages. And then 1B that talks about develop a set of design guidelines that would maintain current allowed heights and keep setbacks comparable to existing single-family homes to ensure developments would be well integrated into neighborhoods. And then 1C, it talks a little bit about flexibility on the number of units allowed per parcel that would vary based on lot size, location, and other factors. And I think that's where I think we just need to take a very thoughtful approach, and I think this is just rearing its head a little sooner than we expected, and I think it's worth exploring and figuring out how we can move forward in a more meaningful way. So that's really it.
Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. Like Councilmember Jimenez, I've had residents. Okay. Same thing happened to Councilmember Camus, I think, it just popped off. I've had residents come to me that are part of a single-family home neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, the house next to them gets sold, and there's a little bit of renovation work being done, and then 6 adults live there, and they're each renting a room, and it's just a surprise, and it happens without any notification to the residents of the neighborhood, the existing residents of the neighborhood. So I agree with Councilmember Jimenez. We probably should have worded that in a slightly different way. So I'll make the motion to accept the memo with the wording that Councilmember Jimenez stated. So rather than discourage, that we're fully vetting single-family home modifications that are designed to facilitate individual room rentals, because what we're concerned about is the impact on the neighborhoods, not just the parking, but just the transparency aspect of having this happen in neighborhoods without people knowing. We need to be transparent about these with our neighbors. And I also want to point out the general plan amendment, the memo that Councilmember Jimenez was talking about, is talking about making a single-family residence into a duplex. This is different. There was, we talked to planning, and they said there was one house where they clearly had created 15 bedrooms in the house. So we're not talking about, renting out 1 to 2 rooms that you in a house that you live in your main house, or even about having an ADU. We're talking about taking a single-family home and making it an apartment building without notifying the neighbors. And so that's the purpose for this memo. And so I move approval.
A motion from Councilmember Davis. Is there a second? Councilmember Reyes seconds it. I have to admit, I'm really concerned about this, and I was surprised to see a green light because we've got a housing crisis, and I know the tension, I think, has been acknowledged by both Councilmember Jimenez and Councilor Davis. I know they're not blind to this, and they've clearly acknowledged it. But what we've articulated as a council when we asked the general plan task force to take a look at single-family designations, and when we as a council voted to expand ADUs, and when we as a council voted to look at garage conversions and how we can legalize those, is I think clearly a council policy direction says we're no longer chaining ourselves to a future single-family housing because we're in a housing crisis. And we've got thousands of families who are getting squeezed out. And as we all know, thousands of homeless on our streets. And we're never going to get our way out of this as long as we are confining ourselves to a world in which everyone's got the same size yard with no ability to modify that in any way to enable us to use land that is overwhelmingly consumed for single-family housing in the city. Now, I can understand there are certainly limitations to this, and we should have reasonable restrictions, and I suspect some of those restrictions may already exist. In the case of a house with 15 bedrooms, I'm assuming we do have zoning restrictions that would prevent something like that. And at the very minimum, a building code, a state building code, if nothing else, that would prevent a certain number of human beings living in a set square footage. I know that exists under state law. And if we want to put limits, that's fine. I'm really concerned about us setting off in this direction, which is counter to what we as a council have said we're trying to do in our city. And so maybe someone can explain to me and help me reconcile a green light with 3 prior council directions, which specifically say single-family zoning cannot be, the altar upon which we prostrate ourselves.
While they're coming down, I just want to point out, Mayor, both Councilmember Jimenez and I are very well aware of the housing crisis, and we're not saying that the single-family homes should not be able to be modified. What we're saying is there are extreme modifications that are happening under current rules without any transparency whatsoever that the neighbors don't know until 10 cars are showing up at a house on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then we have to get code enforcement involved. And what we've found out is that the way that everything's structured, they're just allowed to do this.
And
So
Councilmember
there's
Davis,
no
I am
notification
certain
is the
you're
issue.
right that there are extreme circumstances, and we can set up rules to address extreme circumstances. But the way the memo is framed, it is not dealing with extreme circumstance. It's dealing with someone who wants to allow an external entry to a bedroom, presumably to rent that bedroom. And that is my concern because we've been spending a lot of time on trying to encourage folks who want to offer more housing on their parcels to do so. So, city staff.
Hi, Martina Davis, Supervising Planner, Ordinance and Policy Team, and I also spent many years in the Permit Center. Just to clarify what the current rules are is there's probably surprisingly few rules on single-family houses. The 15-bedroom example, it was a large lot. They didn't bump up on the 45% floor area ratio, and so it was approved because there's nothing in the code that said you couldn't do a 15-bedroom house without doing any additional parking or neighbor notification or anything like that. So we do see not infrequently people adding, say, 7 bedrooms. Every single bedroom has a door outside and a bar sink, its own entry, its own bathroom. They'll add 3-4 sets of washer dryers to houses. So when staff greenlit this, it was with the understanding of addressing sort of the more extreme cases, not a larger, bigger picture going away from junior ADUs or ADUs. It's the extreme. It's putting in some rules to address the extremes.
Okay, well, I would be supportive if that was clearly the direction, all right? But what I see in the memo is not saying anything about extremes. It says we don't want, well, I won't say what the memo says, it speaks for itself. So that's where I'm concerned here. And so we have to be clear about what exactly is being green-lit and what exactly we're approving to move forward. Councilmember Jimenez.
If I can just say, I think it's certainly not in the recommendation, and I'm open to whatever, is the will of the body to modify this in such a way which is acceptable. But in the body of the memo, I think something that captures exactly what you're talking about. It says, this recommendation provides staff maximum flexibility in reviewing the existing standards and returning to council with zoning ordinance revisions. Again, we have just the word discourage on there. Maybe we want to thoroughly vet these kinds of modifications. I don't know if that sort of captures the essence of what you're interested in, not having, it be so broad ranging, but I'm supportive of what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I understand, and I'm not, as an example, the project that I described is it's alive and well. They're actually developing it now. I think the response from the residents would have been much different if there were no external doors and all those bedrooms existed, but there just isn't all these exits and facing people's bedrooms and living rooms and such. And so I think there's ways to work around it in which it could be done thoughtfully, where it would be more acceptable to the residents, and we can really get the best of both worlds, happy residents and some of these projects moving forward. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I appreciate your point, Councilmember. Councilmember, I guess giving staff flexibility isn't exactly what I'm looking for. What I'm really looking for is constraining staff and saying this is only going to apply to extreme circumstances. Because I feel like we're setting off with different directions here as matter of policy. So, I'd be happy to support this if there was an insertion of something in this direction that clearly articulated that we're focused on those extreme circumstances and not on all the other work that we're really hustling hard to do in our planning department, housing department. And might I add, I'm a little surprised it's not a yellow light, given the fact that this is the department that is most impacted by proposals right now. And it's really hard to get things done on a policy standpoint in PBCE because of the number of proposals that are there.
So if I could on that one, Mayor, I think, we probably haven't had enough time to kind of vet this entirely. Just I see the way we're looking at this. Certainly, if this was a standalone item, this would have definitely been yellow. There's no way we could take on this standalone work. What the plan would be is to fold it into work that's already going on with the zoning and general plan conformance project. I think the reason kind of staff made that leap is because they have an understanding of what this is. It may not be reflected entirely in this memo, but the work that they're anticipating can be managed within that effort. But I think, your points around kind of getting a little more clarification so we're all on the same page about expectations here would be really good at this point, because I don't want to greenlight this and then have us kind of not hit the mark because we're thinking it's this much work and it ends up being a lot more work.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we're doing a part of our comprehensive update to the zoning code, and we're doing phase 2 of that. And based on what we were assuming the direction of the memo, it's the kind of work that we could weave into the other work that we're doing. We weren't proposing to do specific outreach on this topic. It would just be done part of a larger body of work that would be woven in. So, but we do need clear direction on how we should tackle this. And by putting it as green light, it wasn't a staff analysis of whether we think, it was really just saying whatever council direction is, but based on what the memo is saying, yes, we could weave this in. It's very smoothly. It was not an evaluation of cost benefit or any of that.
All right, let me offer a suggestion. Here's what the recommendation currently reads. Direct staff to return to council with proposed revisions to zoning ordinance that would discourage single-family home modifications that are clearly designed to facilitate individual room rentals. That's the direction. I would be willing to support this if it included the words after designed to facilitate individual room rentals. If it said in a number that is grossly disproportionate to the size of the parcel. Councilmember Davis or Jimenez, whoever wants to jump in.
So I would, first of all, the motion was to change the word discourage to thoroughly vet. And secondly, rather than saying in a number that is disproportionate to the size of the parcel, I would say that is disproportionate to the size of the homes in the neighborhood already. Because I think what we, and I'd like to hear what planning thinks of this, because the issue, when you said the 15 bedrooms was still at the FAR, that's what we're trying to prevent, because there was no need for notification to the neighbors.
Right.
So
right.
That's the issue where
Yeah, I mean,
they're meeting the current standards,
Yeah.
but it's still A, ticking off the neighbors, and B, I think not what we're intending, even though we do want to densify. We're not talking about densifying in, this could be anywhere in the city,
Yeah.
whether it's close to transit or not.
And so, no, I'm just thinking about the modification. I'm fine with the modification. I think the important thing is that staff clearly understand there's some limit here. Because if we're just going to set procedural requirements for people to be able to allow for rental use of their property, then that's going to be a problem, right? It's obviously at some threshold that it really is of
Right.
concern.
Right, yes, exactly.
Okay, so Councilor Davis, would you like to modify the motion?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll move the memo with this direction, and then I'd like staff to give some input into kind of the conversation before I do that.
This is starting to get trickier.
So
I'm
it's-
starting to wonder if it should be, I mean, if the count elevated to a yellow light, if you have clear direction about discourage this type of thing, we can do that rather quickly. But if it starts to get into a little bit more of a, I don't know.
So we had a discussion before we put the memo forward. I think the understanding is still the same. It's not that we were saying no one can rent their rooms. We never wanted that. And maybe we did not word that properly, but what we don't want are those extreme cases without neighbor notification.
I think, it's one of those, as was it Jester Potter said, you know it when you see it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think we're hoping that staff will come back with some standard.
come back with
that will
something.
tell us,
Okay.
this looks like an extreme case that we don't want, perhaps the 15 rooms. And these are the cases we think should fly through without additional.
Yeah, I mean, I
Notification
don't know, Martine, if you had any thoughts. I think it's going to get more in sort of like FAR scale of building. If someone has a single family house, let's just say it's 1,100 square feet, and they want to add another, 1,500 square feet that are going to be individual bedrooms with individual doors and sinks, then that it would be sort of probably more along that lines.
Right, exactly.
So that's something we can look at.
Yeah, I think as the mayor said, it really is something, you kind of know it when you see it, when you're looking at the plans, and there does tend to be some characteristics. I mean, we certainly need to go back and do more analysis on this, but when you do see 8 bedrooms with doors outside, that's kind of a sign that this is
Yeah.
likely to be a room rental. So I think maybe tying it around kind of design characteristics in keeping with the single-family neighborhood. So again, yeah, the doors is a really easy, good example. But as we look at more examples, I think we will identify more kind of common parameters that really make these look and feel like they're not a house, that they're an apartment or a motel.
And as I understand it, this is really more compatibility with neighborhood as opposed to just lot size and a structural issue.
Yes, yeah.
All right. So I think we've had some examples of that in other contexts.
Okay, so the motion has been, or is about to be amended, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me restate the motion in hopefully a way that is palatable to everyone. Direct staff to return to council with proposed revisions to the zoning ordinance that would thoroughly vet single home modifications that are clearly designed to facilitate a large number of individual room rentals. How's that?
Could I just suggest supplanting the word large with excessive?
Excessive.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, with an excessive number of individual room rentals.
Thank
That
you.
sounds good.
All right, fantastic. Is
clear.
that okay with the seconder?
It's okay with me. I just don't know what excessive means based on this memo. If we're going away from what the memo says in the description or the background, which was to me pretty reasonable, and I agree with you, Mayor. I think going from 3 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms is reasonable. My home was no, but in your background, you use the example of 5 bedrooms to an existing 3-bedroom home.
To have 8.
Oh, 8 total.
5 new ones.
Oh, that's.
It's additional, apparently.
Oh, I see. Okay, so maybe I read it wrong. So that's what I was, and I thought my home was modified this way before I moved in. But so we're not going to give a number at this point. Excessive will be based on the feedback of code enforcement.
Yeah, so we will come back with a definition of what excessive is, and the council can bless that or modify that, but we'll need to come up with a definition of what that is. And I think at this point, what we're talking about is sort of the extraordinary case where someone is expanding a house beyond sort of the typical size of a typical house, and they're proposing to put in multiple bedrooms with individual sinks and individual entryways to all the units.
Got it. Yes, the 5-bedroom piece, I read it differently. So yes, I'm in agreement.
Okay, so it's okay with the seconder. Councilmember Camus?
Well, Mayor, I actually had the same concerns that you did. I used to rent my one of my bedrooms to a student when I went a while back, and I don't want to discourage people from renting, not to excessiveness, but I think it. I don't know. And then now, look, I'll support this, although I have some misgivings about letting staff be the basically the decider of what the word excessive means. And, in some area, it depends on what the staff is feeling that day. Well, I mean, if somebody's asking for another 3 bedrooms, if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, that might sound excessive. I don't know. That's my only concern.
I should clarify, I don't think this is the ordinance that's going to have the word excessive. I think staff is going to flesh that out for us.
We'll define that. Council will bless it or modify it. It'll be
Yeah.
up to council. And it needs to be an objective standard too. It
Yeah.
can't just be discretionary.
Right.
That's
Okay.
I'm feeling this.
That's what I'm looking for. I don't want to just use a word to signify a law.
I think one thing that council should be aware, and Martina, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the way the state law has gone now is, you can include an ADU and I believe a JDU or a junior ADU now per state law. So you already get 2 units that have individual doors. And you can still rent rooms, or you could rent the whole house out to a number of adults. Technically, they operate as a single family housekeeping unit, and they would just share the house. They wouldn't have their own, entryway. Well, you can do that now, but there's other ways that those things can happen already. So I think what we're just talking about is the extreme case is what we heard, where someone actually buys a property and is essentially converting it to almost an apartment building with a lot of units at a scale that's that's above and beyond what's in the neighborhood.
I get that, but even apartment buildings, actually, I remember we were talking about how many people, under the rental protection ordinance, we were talking about that in a 2-bedroom unit, you can actually have 15 or 20 people. I forget, it depends on the square footage. So it's really, I would think that is excessive, but apparently it's okay by our laws.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by defining what the word excessive means. And then I have somebody who is buying a home and then sticking their parents in the backyard by building an ADU.
Hopefully under a roof.
Yeah. Well, building an ADU. How big? Our laws allow like 900 square feet, or could you build a bigger ADU? What constitutes the word ADU? Can they stick another 2,000 square foot ADU in the backyard?
No, right now the maximum is 900, but based on updated state laws, that maximum will be increasing.
To what?
So for 2-bedroom units, the state will not allow us to restrict to less than 1,000 square feet. So if we want to allow 2-bedroom units, those units have to be allowed to be up to 1,000 square feet.
1,000?
1,000, yeah.
Okay, I'll tell him his parents get to live in a 1,000 square foot home. Okay, thank you.
It's better than just sitting in the backyard. Okay, Vice Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. And now that all the sausage making has been done, I just have a clarifying question, and that's about the issue about rentals. So is the intent of the signers of the memo to just restrict rentals? Or if I wanted to have my whole family move in, cousins, children, nephews, and have their own doors, would that be an issue? Or is it just about rentals?
Well, I think at the end of the day, when it's going to be based on design, having all those external doors is probably going to be one of the criteria. Because what we've seen is that those are not people who are related to each other. So our intent was about individual room rentals. I used to live next door to a house that was all chopped up and it was individual room rentals, and the owner was not on site. And he was, frankly, in the first 5 years of us living in that house, he was on site. I saw him 3 times. So what we're trying to work out here and improve is, first of all, notification to the neighbors. Building an apartment means that there's going to be a community meeting, or there's at least going to be posting outside that project that's happening. What we have right now for these single-family home modifications, there's no notification whatsoever. There's not even a posting about the modifications outside that home for people going by at the neighborhood. So the main thing is really about notifications and about these individual room rentals. Generally, the owner does not live on site. So it's not about, renting out your room to a college student. I hope people do that. I hope empty nesters are renting out their rooms. We know we need it. I hope people are building ADUs. This is a completely separate issue.
Yeah, and just to confirm it, Councilmember Davis is right. It's going to be about design, because it may be a family one day and it may be 2 months later, a year later, a whole different situation. So it's not about the actual people living there. It's about the design of the structure. And I just want to confirm, I was asked this, yes, we are proposing to keep it as a green light item as currently recommended.
Great, thank you. I got my question answered, and I will support the motion.
Okay. Then I also have Councilmember Rennes and Councilmember Davis. Did you want to speak anymore?
I just wanted to lastly say, I already shared my thoughts about what I misunderstood on this memo, but I just wanted to make sure that we're continuing to think of families, especially families, like you said, empty nesters who are not leaving. That's a large portion of my district. They have large homes, a large lot, and I've had residents come to me and ask me about the ADUs, especially when we were just releasing some of that information. And so I just want to make sure that whatever changes we make, that we continue to have families in mind. And, there's a lot of blending of families nowadays. And I know that I certainly would want to have privacy and a separate door from my son. If he was to return back to I have said, please do not return back to this home. Go to college, own your own home.
Spoken like a true mother. Okay.
But if in case it did, I would want absolutely a separate door for that. So just please, let's continue to think about families.
And maybe an internal fence. Okay. All right. On the motion then, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We'll move on, and that will be incorporated in the work we're doing in the general plan. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we have no other items, and we have no cards for open forum, as far as I can tell. So everybody have a nice day. Meeting's adjourned.